See me eye to eye. Stand up like a man. Even from the other side. On the level. Never had a choice. Never had a chance. Never had a voice.
Hey everybody, welcome to another MoGraph podcast. I'm your host, Matt Milstead. Joining me this week, I'm super excited to talk to him, Henry Foster, aka Toadstorm. You may also know him as the creator of MOPS Plus. So super excited to have you here, Henry.
Thanks, happy to be here.
Yeah. I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Otoy. You know them, you love them. They are the makers of Octane Render and the Render Network. With Octane, you can create super photorealistic renders incredibly fast. And for those renders that need that little extra push of power, the Render Network has you covered. The Render Network allows you to render your Octane Redshift and Blender Cycles frames in a fraction of the time and a fraction of the cost of other cloud rendering services. Also, they've just introduced the new Otoy AI, so which is really cool. It's a whole set of AI tools that you can try. Go to beta.otoy.ai. Let me double check that. beta.otoy.ai.com. Yeah. And give it a try. Also, they've got this new Canvas feature as well, canvas.otoy.ai, and it's a whole like node pipeline and really cool. Make sure and check that out. Also, give them a shout out for sponsoring the show and say thanks for being our universal sponsor. But we are here to talk to you, Henry. Super excited to have you here. As I was telling you before the show, you know, I have been on this Houdini journey off and on for the past like 6 years. When we released Fancher's course, Stop Being Afraid of Houdini, I was like, okay, I have got to go through this entire thing and I've got to make sure that it'll work for anyone who's fresh into, you know, Houdini and stuff. And so I went through the entire 40 hours. I spent a whole week like going through his course, and I retained very little after not being in Houdini after that. So this has been like a long like course of, you know, trying Houdini again and then leaving and then trying Houdini. It wasn't until recently when I joined Already Been Chewed that I'm like, okay, I have some of the best Houdini artists in the world right here. You know, I want to make sure that I am taking advantage of that, you know? And so, yeah, I'm really excited to have you here because MOPS Plus has been a big part of my Houdini journey within the past little while. So yeah, excited to talk to you about it. So
yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes I'm kind of working in a vacuum and I don't always hear from users about what they're using. They're just using it, and I guess that means it works. But I don't hear a whole lot of direct talk from people saying like, "Hey, I used it this way and I liked this," or "I didn't like this." So
yeah,
that's great news.
It's been fun, like especially for the weekly Thursday night MoGraph hangouts that I've been doing, the live streams. You know, we've been playing around a lot with Houdini, and I was showing off MOPS Plus like a week or two ago. You know, just talking to people and showing off how cool it was. You know, and it's so cool to me how like intuitive it is. You know. Especially when you kind of have even just like the littlest understanding of Houdini. It's like, I was like, I'm playing along and I'm like, I wonder if this fall off will work without me not having instances or anything in there. And sure enough, it's like, oh, okay, this absolutely works. It's super cool.
And I mean, to Cinema's credit, I totally stole that entire workflow, like the whole concept of just like having like I'm going to operate on everything at once, and I'm going to modulate that operation by this amount. Like, there's a reason that they picked that, and the reason that the guys at Mainframe did that with MASH. It's just, it works. It's intuitive. It makes sense to people, and you don't have to think too hard about it. So
yeah,
it made sense to translate it.
I was gonna say, because I was looking at your profile, and your background. You started out in Maya, correct?
Yeah, and I'm still a Maya artist now.
Oh, okay.
To my regret. It's Maya's still like, it is still the industry standard in some circles for a reason.
Yeah.
So there are good reasons to stick with it. There are things that it does more effectively than Houdini, although not many anymore.
Yeah.
Houdini's getting better every year.
The modeling tools, I would say, the modeling tools in Maya were always my favorite. Like, I felt like modeling in Maya was much more intuitive than modeling in C4D. Yeah. So, and
granted, I don't know cinema very well at all.
Yeah.
But and Houdini like is good for certain kinds of modeling, but straightforward modeling, when you're in that kind of procedural world, trying to keep that in mind and model in like straightforward at the same time, it's hard. Every operation you do, all of a sudden you start seeing things stacking up on the right, and like it's not like when you're working in Maya or Blender where everything is much more immediate.
Yeah. It surprises me to hear that you've never worked in C4D. That was going to be one of my questions I've asked you. It's because MOPS is so similar to the way C4D works. It would make sense to me that it was like, you were originally a C4D artist and wanted the same functionality in Houdini, not a Maya artist coming over to Houdini.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of that is the influence of the original co-founder of MOPS, Moritz Schwind from Intagma.
Okay.
Because he was a cinema artist for a long time, but we both kind of came across the project independently. So Moritz, cinema 4D artist, and he had started translating this on his own. He had started like trying to take that same paradigm and wrap it into Houdini. And I was doing the same thing for completely different, I guess for the same reason, but I was approaching it from a completely different angle because I knew MASH from working in Maya for so long. And so I was trying to translate something MASH-like into Houdini terms, and he was doing it with C4D, and he found out that I was doing it. I'm not, he must have been seeing what I was doing, posting to Discord or something.
Yeah.
And then got a hold of me and was like, "Hey, buddy, like, can we work on this together? Like, it looks like you made some progress." So we put our heads together, and then, he spent a lot more time in the motion design world than I did. Like, I've worked most of my career at that point was in advertising, so I was used to doing very fast turnarounds, quick jobs, and like alongside motion graphics artists. But I was never in their world. I was always doing the more straightforward technical 3D work, like character style work, or product rendering, and then they were handling the motion graphics end of it. So it was always there. I knew kind of what they were doing, but I never was in that world as deep as he was. So when we put it together, a lot of the stuff that he knew from the C4D world became a little bit more of the front end of the project.
Yeah.
And then I was more handling a lot of the back end stuff. So like figuring out how to turn it into an API, how to turn it into something that builds on itself rather than just being a direct clone. Because I we both still wanted it to be Houdini as much as possible, so that it wasn't like its own ecosystem, I guess, because we didn't want it to have to be completely separate from the rest of how Houdini works.
Yeah, and he's not a part of MOPS Plus, like, now, right?
No, he bailed a while ago.
It's just you, right? I mean, you're a solo doing this.
It's been just me since, like, I want to say 2019.
Wow.
So Moritz and I worked together on it for about a year. And then, Moritz, he admitted it himself. He loves starting projects. He doesn't really love finishing them or maintaining them, really. And so at a certain point, he's like, "Yeah, sorry, man, I don't want to be on this forever. I gotta." Like, he had other things. He he loves developing tools, but as a, here, have fun.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to support it, and I don't blame him. That's a lot of
I
work.
get that. Yeah, I can only imagine. Just just like we've been doing the website and the weekly podcasts, and with a full-time job that I now have, is a lot of work. I can only imagine having a full-time job like you do. Because you're working, you're not a freelancer. You're working for an actual company, and still having to do all the MOPS Plus support and stuff like that.
My nights and weekends can get busy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. But does a new version, how well does it translate over to new versions and stuff like that? Or is there a lot of like breaking anytime they do a new release or a new dot update or something like that?
Usually it's pretty smooth. I mean, Side Effects develops things really, really fast, and I
they
love
do.
them for it. But it's also punishing.
Yeah.
It's generally fine because the overall logic of how things move in Houdini hasn't really changed much. It's only really specific things that end up getting me. In Houdini 19, they changed. We used to do a lot of really hacky stuff to be able to deform, like to scale objects, for example. When you're in a rigid body simulation, you used to have to do a lot of really hacky stuff to make that happen by like changing the underlying transform through Vex in a way that was not very intuitive to most users. In Houdini 19, they introduced the ability to use template attributes to do that the same way that you would do it with Houdini's copy to points node. So it's like a more standard way, a somewhat more understandable way of like influencing copies. But in doing that, they took all of the stuff that I had done under the hood on my end and like completely turned it inside out. And so I wasn't really, at the time, I wasn't paying close attention to the alpha. And so I didn't really realize, I didn't know that this was coming until not too long before release. Someone warned me, and I opened up the beta and panicked for like a couple weeks and really rewrote all of my solvers to work with Houdini 19 and still stay backwards compatible with everything before that.
Wow.
So that stuff happens occasionally, but in general, it's like, honestly, the only thing that I worry about is that Side Effects is eventually just going to write me out of existence. Like they'll find the stuff that, they've already several times, like they found tools that I made in order to sort of sidestep a gap in their implementation. And then, their programmers are extremely smart. And they're like actual adult programmers and not children tinkering around with like little scraps of code.
Right.
Like I am. And so, like I had a tool for a while that like would clip, like the clip stop. I had one that would clip by attribute. That used to be something that you had to do manually by doing a really kind of strange manipulation of like basically turning the position, like the space of an object, and like rearranging that so that it's arranged in space based on an attribute, like a mask attribute. Then you clip by that height, and then when you turn it back into the original space, it's very strange to think about, especially if you're coming from like a cinema or even a Maya background. But like that was how you got smoothly eroded geometry, and now it's built in. And there's plenty of examples of stuff like that like Side Effects gets around to it eventually, and because they're real programmers, it's much faster and more efficient than what I can do. But there's still, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's speaking of that, it's really funny because every time I bring up cops or mops. Sorry, there's so many ops. Mops. Everyone's like, I'm surprised they Side Effects hasn't just bought mops yet.
Well, in a similar vein as Moritz, I don't think they want to support it, and I don't blame them.
That's funny.
It's also the guys who the core devs at Side Effects have kind of a design philosophy, or overall they've maintained this for a while, where they have the labs team who for a while were doing some of these higher level tools that were like big wrapped up more abstracted tools, I guess. And they're very good, but it's a different development team than the core team at Houdini, who is very focused on the atomic nodes, the really low level stuff that makes Houdini tick. And their whole philosophy is that if they get too wrapped up in these highly abstracted tools that are sort of doing everything for you and prescribing a workflow, that Houdini will sort of lose its flexibility, like lose the core essence that makes it the kind of toy box that it is.
Yeah, that makes
You know,
sense.
I can see both sides of it. Like there's definitely, the problem is if you go in one direction too far or the other, or if you like lock people out of one workflow or another, it can really, it can put up walls, or it can slow people down.
Yeah.
You know, it's a tough balance trying to keep something intuitive without putting up those walls.
Yeah.
And that applies to like basically any software. Like it's part of the reason why Houdini is so good once you know it, but such a huge pain in the ass to learn at the very beginning, is just because they give you all the rope in the world to hang yourself with, and you're stuck in there with like a gazillion Legos, and you have no guide, you have no map. You're just like, I don't know I don't even know what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's just part of the fun.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like even just a few settings or something can be detrimental to your like being able to play your timeline and stuff. We were working on a project this week, and Fancher jumped into one of the projects, I'm sure he did a little bit more than a couple of clicks, you know, but like I couldn't even get it to load in Redshift, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like he did his thing, and now it's like smooth as butter, you know. And you know, I've found that has been my issue sometimes, especially with Houdini, is I'll start adding nodes or making it way too complicated, and it's like, okay, well, this didn't need to be as complicated. Now I can't even see what's going on. You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's not just you. That's everybody's first instinct in Houdini, is to over-engineer everything, so that you can feel really smart and good about yourself.
Yeah,
and then everything implodes under the weight.
when you're building tools for MOPS, though, how do you leverage that, you know, equilibrium of making sure it's not too bloated and still be able to play well?
It's hard. What I try to do is make it so that anytime I add a new tool to MOPS specifically, the first thing is like, does it make sense from a MOPS standpoint? Because there have been other tools that I have built that could have been included, but just didn't really fit into the overall problem that MOPS is trying to solve.
Yeah.
You know, you have like these really like wide-ranging toolkits, like odd tools and things like that, that are excellent, but very, very broad.
Yeah.
And both for my own sanity, and also just to like make sure that MOPS has like a consistent message, I guess. I don't know. Like I try to make sure that like, okay, if this isn't applicable to motion or the kinds of problems that a motion designer is going to run into on a regular basis, and like MOPS can do stuff for visual effects too. It's not strictly motion graphics, because like you run into issues manipulating transforms no matter what in Houdini. But just like I try to make sure that it fits in that box, basically, so that it's something that you would expect to see. The other side of it is then making sure that I'm making as few as possible single purpose tools that only do one thing.
Yeah.
Because the more targeted it is, the more you end up with this really huge bloated library of things that, you know, it's like having too many kitchen utensils, where you know, you have your inside the egg scrambler, or you have like your you know, your butter dispenser. You know, I literally, these things exist. The example I did in a talk a couple of years ago was like, for these single purpose tools, was like a sausage lifter that you could buy on Amazon that was specifically for vice versa, like specifically for white sausages.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't, I mean, why, like, just get a pair of tongs, right? Like, you don't want that one specific thing. Like, you don't want to have to like put down your screwdriver and reach for that thing every single time you're trying to do something. So it's just trying to make sure that there's multiple ways that you can apply this thing, that it's like, that's valid in more than one scenario, unless there's always exceptions. There's some problems that are just so irritating to solve that even if they only show up in specific scenarios, they're worth building tools for. Things like there's a tool that builds glue constraints at run, or like other types of constraints for rigid body sims at runtime. Because if you try to do that yourself, it's not something that comes up all the time, but like when you want things to collide and then stick together, at least at the time, the built-in tools were not very intuitive for that. And you had to do a lot of really horrible math to like figure out the rotations. And like as soon as you start getting involved in like trying to solve rotations through math in 3D, like you don't want to be there. Trust me.
That's funny. That's funny. And are you building node trees and stuff like that and writing Vex in there, or is there actual like programming involved other than Vex, in order to build out your tools?
There's a lot of Python. So if you crack open, so there's MOPS, the open source stuff, and then there's MOPS Plus.
Yeah.
And the open source stuff, you can take any of those notes. So it's all free. It's all open source on GitHub, and crack them open and sort of see what my approach is to building these things. And it's generally speaking, it's a mix of SOPs and Vex. And then there's usually Python kind of thrown in various places to either write expressions that are too complicated to do in HScript.
Yeah.
Or Python state handles in Houdini especially, which is not something that you'd be that clued in on if you're not doing a lot of tool development. But it's a way, it's basically how you do modern handles, like viewport interactions in Houdini.
Okay. It's
sort of its own language for describing like how you handle interactions. So like, what does the mouse do? What do you draw in the viewport? Do you have like manipulators or accessory geometry that you're drawing on the screen to like help the user figure out what they're doing? That sort of stuff all has to be done, generally speaking, via Python. And it's kind of low-level Python. It's not very fun. I kind of liken it to writing interfaces in Qt, where it is very fussy and there's a lot of boilerplate. But the advantage is that it's quick. When you're writing anything that's supposed to be happening in the viewport, it's adapting to user interaction, like the worst thing in the world is for it to be non-responsive. It has to be fast. Yeah. And so unfortunately that usually means there's some overhead there, like for the programmer.
How long after, so you said you got into 3D in 2006, right?
That's when I first started professionally. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm old to date myself. I started around 2003, I think, is when I first started taking 3D classes.
Okay, about the same.
And I started freelancing.
You just called me old. That's fine.
Yeah, we're in the same boat, man. My back hurts. I'm sure yours does too. Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. So you started professionally in 2006. Your initial software you were in was Maya. Did you move over to Houdini from Maya, or when you got out of college or whatever, or school, like, did you already have a basic understanding of Houdini, or what was it? Basically, I'm trying to get to, like, what brought you into Houdini, and what was the learning curve for like creating your own tools? Because you're talking about Python scripting and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, I've been in 3D for probably just as long, but I have very little knowledge about Python and stuff like that. But I can assume as a Houdini artist, you're having to write Vex. It's probably generally the same, it's the same concepts. It's just different vernacular,
Yeah. So the programming thing kind of happened by accident. Like, honestly, completely by accident. I don't have any kind of formal education in software development of any kind. So I started as a Maya artist, but by the time I got there, I had already known a little bit of JavaScript.
Okay.
And this is because it's going to sound really stupid. When I was in high school and I was about to go to college, there was a game out at the time, and this would have been like 1999 or 2000 or something. There was a game called Neverwinter Nights. It was basically Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
But you could, if you wanted to be, the dungeon master and write your own content for it, you could do it, but they had a language called NW script that was inside it. And me being, a huge pathetic nerd, I was like, oh, I'm going to learn this. I want to figure this out so that like when I go off to college, I can still play D&D with my high school friends. So I sat there and like dug through it and started learning the syntax. And it turns out that NW script was just JavaScript. And I didn't know this. I was just sort of digging through it and figuring it out. But then later on in college, a professor that was teaching Flash animation at the time noticed that I knew kind of some of these commands. And so while I was taking Flash animations, he was sort of like pushing a little bit more and a little bit more action script at me at the time.
Yeah.
Because he was starting a games company and wanted action script programs.
That's
So that was like one of
hilarious.
my first jobs out of school when I was still living in Boston. Was like I was working for a very small, now defunct games company, programming Flash games. And,
That's
simple
hilarious.
stuff. I still
Yeah.
didn't have a formal
Action
knowledge
Script
of it,
2
but I
or
had
Action
enough to
Script
do.
3?
This was Action Script 2 to start.
Yeah, I
eventually
loved
migrated
Action
to
Script
3 before
2.
leaving, but
Action
yeah.
Script 3 was way over my head. I was like, I don't know. I don't even get it.
That's when they made it object oriented or
Yeah.
something. I forget. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
But so I already kind of knew that. And then as it turns out, Maya's internal scripting language, Mel, is also using JavaScript syntax.
Interesting.
So when I started freelancing in Maya, and I started getting my ass kicked by the hours, because like everyone knows when you're working in motion design, like
Yeah.
it can be pretty brutal, especially when you're younger and you're first starting out. And so I started, one of the real perks of Maya that I wish other software would do is that every action that you take, Maya has a script editor open,
Mm-hmm.
and every menu action, everything that you create within Maya usually has a mel command associated with it. So when you're in the UI, all you're doing under the hood is just running these text commands.
Interesting.
And you can see them printed out when you do things.
Uh-huh.
So when I was doing certain patterns, because this was motion design shops that didn't have a pipeline. So like the animators update a scene and I have to get that into my lighting scene. How do I get that data?
Yeah.
And I find myself just like sitting there and clicking the same 2 buttons over and over and over again, trying to update all of these things. And it was driving me insane. It's so boring to have to do that. And so watching the script editor print out these things, I was like, oh, I could probably like just write a script to do this. And so that's how I started building tools. That turned into writing, more complicated interfaces. And then that turned into writing like full on pipeline tools to be able to like publish assets and get things in and out of scenes and like fix all the stupid stuff that a 3D artist would run into on a daily basis, especially back then, just like all little pipeline gripes or like setting up materials I would use all the time or like building quick rig controls, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to say in 2008 or something like that, another artist that I worked with looked at some of the code I was doing. He was like, oh, why are you writing this in Mel? Like, what's wrong with you? You should use Python.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I thought he was a jerk, but I looked into it anyways, because like, okay, this can't be that bad. And after a little bit of grumbling and whining about it, like it eventually made sense to me why Python would be the better option.
Yeah.
And so I started writing tools in Python, and then, the rest sort of came from there. By the time I started using Houdini in like, I want to say this was like 2009, 2010, something like that.
Uh-huh.
I started because an artist there this really excellent compositor that I used to work with, who was also a very good generalist and a programmer. He's one of those geniuses that you love to hate because he was just good at everything.
Yeah.
Matt Lavoie, you're not listening, but thanks. He showed me like a simple fluid sim,
Uh-huh.
but something that, he was like melting something.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't sound like much now, but doing that in Maya at that time was so irritating.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the worst. Like you didn't want to deal with it, or you would have to go into real flow and do it there. And there's all kinds of problems with getting data in and out of it. And then I looked at some of the other stuff that it was capable of doing. I saw that it had L systems, which at the time, L systems are a way of describing branching structures. It's very old. It's like a language that was developed in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how a lot of plant generators used to be built. And I loved the idea of being able to build plants and branching structures. But if you were doing that in Maya at the time, you were doing it by hand, or you were doing it with something that Duncan Brinsmead from Autodesk developed called paint effects.
Okay.
Which was cool, but you didn't have a lot of control over it. And when I saw what people were doing with L systems in Houdini, I was like, oh, like you can literally, it's the turtle language, right? So you can just say move forward, turn left, turn right,
mm-hmm.
wiggle by this much, and just like you can completely construct it from scratch and generate these really complicated structures. And I was obsessed with it. So I started looking for both of those reasons, just because like I felt like I had hit a bunch of walls in Maya that I couldn't get past.
For sure.
And there was it's just like this whole different world of like how 3D works in front of me that Houdini was exposing.
Yeah, and I can imagine in
Um,
2011, like they're not developing a lot of those tools and stuff like that. I mean, I don't even know if they are currently, you know.
no, I mean they've what they've done is acquired a bunch of technology from guys that are still interested in writing software.
Yeah.
And so there is stuff that they'll add, but realistically, like Maya hasn't changed in like 15 or 20 years,
Yeah.
aside from a few things that they've tacked onto the sides of it, like Bifrost. It's the same thing I've always used for my entire career.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's a good thing because I don't have to think that hard. I
Yeah.
already just sort of know it intuitively. But yeah, for everything else, there's still 2D.
Yeah. That's cool. That's super cool. So, let me ask you this. You've mentioned, you're working from home and stuff like that. I do have to say I'm very appreciative that you're so active in the community, like on the Slack. So I had the Houdini Slack for years. It's not so much now, like now that I think there's an official Houdini Discord, which if anyone's got an invite to, please tell me, because no one at work will give it to me because they think I'm a noob and don't want me in there, But I'm calling you out, Cody. Anyway, but I had muted the Houdini channel in the MoGraph Slack because it was just so active. There were so many people in there asking questions, and since I've come back to Houdini, I've unmuted the Houdini channel, and I noticed how active you are. That's kind of how we connected. And I was so surprised. I'm like, I use your tools every day. It's become an integral part of my workflow. And you're just in here chatting with everyone, telling them to use MOPS Plus or telling them not to, and it's so cool. Like, I'm super appreciative of that.
Yeah, I mean, so it does help to talk to these people and say like, oh, you could solve this with MOPS, But really, a lot of the reason that I'm in these places talking to other artists is because, like, yeah, I do work from home, and the work that I'm doing right now, there's a couple of 3D artists doing what I do, but I am working for a really wonderful medical technology company, but it is a medical technology company.
Yeah.
It's not a 3D company, and so this is kind of my way of, I like helping people and I like teaching, but it's also my way of both keeping sharp to like what's going on in 3D, like staying on top of technological changes, staying on top of other parts of Houdini and other 3D software that I don't spend a lot of time in right now for various reasons. It's just, it keeps me sharp. But it also gives me really good insight on what kinds of problems people are most frequently struggling with. And that's a good indicator. If I start seeing the same thing over and over and over again, I can be like, oh, okay, is this the kind of problem that I could solve? For a long time it was like, obviously with MOPS it's like, well, how come I can't like rotate packed primitives, right? How come I can't transform these things? And it's like, well, it's because you have to use linear algebra and like a bunch of vex to like set all the, it's hell. No one wants to do that. But more recent examples were like people were having a lot of trouble with texture randomization. And at the time, if you did, before UDIM tags were like a little bit more dialed in, if you had a lot of different things that you wanted to override separately with textures and stuff like that, like when you're setting strings, there wasn't really an easy way to do that. There wasn't a gestural way to be like, okay, well, I have these 10 textures and I want to assign these things to all these different copies based on a gesture, based on a ramp or an attribute or something like that. You would have to sit there and write conditional statements in Vex being like, if 1, this texture, if 2, this, if 3, this. And that's not much fun. So I wrote something called the attribute mapper that is basically a spreadsheet that uses Qt as the interface so that you can just sort of type those things in and be like, or like select your textures, populate it, and then just say like, here's the number range of the attribute that determines like what gets mapped to what. So there's stuff like that. It's like you start seeing patterns and you start looking for things that people find painful. And so sitting around and helping people, like I put in time on nights and weekends and sometimes lunch breaks,
Yeah.
just to like kind of check in and see. And like it's helpful for me. It helps me grow as a technical artist, and it helps me stay on top of things when I'm not. It was easy to stay on top of things in 2010 when I'm in a pit
Yeah.
surrounded by other artists like losing their minds,
Yeah.
working 14 hours a day, like trying to solve something.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder when you're at home, you're covered in cats or whatever, like, and you're not. The technical challenges are real, but they are different.
Yeah.
And so it's important, I think, to sort of keep your finger on the pulse of like, what are other people who are still in that pit suffering through right now, and like, how can you make that easier?
Yeah, 100%. I have noticed that, especially when you're moving over from a different software or something. So I've been really big into Claude AI lately, and it has helped me significantly in building stupid little shelf tools, for things that I do every day, because I'm not a programmer, but I can very easily go into Claude and tell it exactly what I want. For example, the other day, I was like, why isn't there like a solo button? Just one that you click on one of your nodes, you hit solo, and then it only shows you that node, and then you click it off and everything goes back to the way it was. I was like, why isn't that the case? And I built it in Claude in like 5 or 10 minutes. It's like, all right, that has now become a part of my everyday thing just from working in that and running into those problems and stuff like that. It's super cool.
And like the power to build your own tools is a big one. I mean, there have been jobs where other animators or other artists on the team were like working all day and all night. And admittedly, I have vivid memories of, watching the animators tear their hair out. And then they would send me a new scene that had like 110 characters in it or something, like full sequence with all the animation. I'd be like, oh, okay, cool, buddy. And I would open up a script that I wrote that was like, I don't know, 300 lines long or something, highlight everything, change one string, hit enter, and then go up and get a cup of coffee or something.
That's
and
funny.
Like, I'd come back in 30 minutes and everything was ready to go and I could render again.
That's hilarious.
It saved my bacon plenty of times. I can't imagine not going into this line of work without just a little bit of, you don't have to be any kind of Python genius, but just knowing how to automate a couple of basic things, or having the wherewithal to be willing to open the script editor and just suffer through it a little bit, so that you can understand kind of how Houdini thinks, or just like how to think about task automation, period. It's so important when you're in front of the computer anyways doing this stuff. Just like learn a couple of, it's like, you're going to travel to some other country, like get a phrase book, like learn the basics so you can get around and make your visit a lot smoother. It's no different. I feel like every Houdini artist, every Maya artist, honestly, anybody doing 3D at any level should know rudimentary Python, like just enough to automate one or two things.
I will say something I really appreciate about Houdini, and I learned this while building some tools for myself. I was building out a Orbix exporter for Octane in Houdini, so that I could just like pipe in some object level SOPs or whatever, so that I could just export those. And going through, it's a pretty heavy, it's a lot of code. But the thing that I appreciate about Houdini is like when you're referencing something, if you highlight over it or hover over it, it tells you exactly what that expression is or whatever it's referencing, so that when you're writing code for yourself, it's like, I know exactly what I need to reference. Versus Cinema 4D, it's like, oh, no, here's the API online somewhere. Good luck, Yeah.
And I mean, that's Cinema 4D's approach.
Yeah.
And like, it's a valid one. Their goal when they designed it was like, we're going to abstract everything away from you so you don't have to think about this stuff.
Yeah.
But you hit a wall fast.
Yeah.
And that's like it's a real design problem. There's reasons to do it one way or the other. I land on the more Houdini side of it, where I would rather just like drink from the fire hose.
Yeah.
But there's real reason for it. Like their design paradigm, what they do totally makes sense. And for a lot of people, it's all they need.
Yeah.
It's just the more that you sort of put blinders on and say, look, this is the way that you do it. There's one correct way, and we're going to just sort of lead you along this path. the smaller your world gets.
Yeah.
And there's other advantages to like just putting up with the sometimes mental horror that is working in Houdini.
Yeah.
Because it can be a lot. It really, you have, but having learned it, even in the first year or two, my understanding of how 3D actually works under the hood for any application is so much higher than it used to be, because Houdini expects that what a normal is. It expects that what winding order is, what vertices are doing, all of that stuff. It doesn't really pull any punches. And so you learn really quickly what these things are and why they work the way they do in a way that can inform the rest of your work, at least from a technical level.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the, kind of giving back to the community thing and being very active in it, I am also very appreciative. And, this is really cool because I feel like it's also a Houdini way of thinking, because Houdini offers up like the free apprentice and you can use it completely. But you also have a free version of MOPS that does a lot of the standard things that you would do, such as the instancer and the transform and fall offs and stuff. And then you've got MOPS Plus, which is actually a paid one, that has a whole bunch of extra things, such as like the type tools and stuff like that. It's really cool. And I appreciate the fact that, you kind of put that out there for people to just use for free.
Yeah, that was something that Moritz and I had discussed originally, and like I don't think either of us really thought that it would get as big as it did. I think it kind of goes back to Moritz like just not really wanting to be committed to tools. He just likes making stuff and throwing it out there and going to the next thing.
Yeah.
And then by the time that Plus was starting to take shape, Moritz was already done and on to the next thing. And I just we had said early on in the project publicly that MOPS was free and open source because we just wanted people to use it. We thought it was cool. And I didn't feel comfortable at all trying to rug pull anybody on that. I didn't want to say like, oh, well, that was free, but now it's, now it's not. That's kind of shitty. I like to pretend I have ethics about this or something. So
appreciate that.
Thanks. So the Plus became like what are the things that MOPS hasn't done yet that it could do that are just a bit weirder or more specialized, or like an extra layer on top of that. And so a lot of the Plus tools are just sort of more specialized motion graphics versions of, some of it is new, like the typography obviously is new. But the physics solvers are basically like the core part of MOPS, which is like just making it easier to transform things. How does that get translated into something that you can use in dynamics? So like I want to be able to easily rotate or add noise to or move things along a path in a solver rather than just procedurally like in the SOP graph. So yeah, I didn't. Once it was released for free, I was like, okay, this is it. This is the free thing. And the reason the Plus stuff was paid is just like, I was putting a lot of hours into this stuff, and so I had to.
I mean, the
thing, justify it otherwise.
The price alone it's so cheap. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's a very cheap tool, and the amount of time that it will save you, it's worth the price alone. Like, and especially if you're just getting into Houdini, or coming from C4D, it's such a valuable tool, and then also on top of, doing the free MOPS tier, you also just recently, you had a class on Houdini School that you just recently made free as well. That's specifically for MOPS, which is so cool.
That was through Houdini School, and it was not originally a free class because Deb, who runs Houdini School, reached out to me and asked me if I would teach something, and so it was like a joint effort between the two of us. But it's been a few years, and I didn't have a whole lot of, I guess, modern education on it. Like there were a lot of videos released by a lot of different people, and there were talks that I had done, but there wasn't like a start to finish, here's how it works kind of course really.
Yeah.
And so I just, I figured it was time to get it out there and hopefully have more people be able to sort of see how I would use MOPS, or how I would teach it.
Yeah.
And then the last part of it was like sort of teaching people why it's necessary, and also why the things that it does are actually really hard.
Yeah.
Like the underlying math, which like neither Moritz nor I, when we first built this, neither of us really, maybe Moritz expected it and I just didn't read him well. Neither of us thought it would be this hard.
Yeah.
But the math that underlies rotations is like well described, but it's mentally pretty tough to keep in your head. I don't know if you ever tried to parse a quaternion before and like look at the numbers and make any sense out of it, but it's a little weird. They're not very human readable. And this stuff is not very intuitive, and even now, even though I've taught a course on this math apparently, you have to sit down and think about it. And when you're in the pit and you have a deadline in 15 minutes, you don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
You just want to gesture at the screen and be like, I want to do this, and it's done. So that course is free. It is let's see, I don't know, 3 courses long. It's probably like 6 or 8 hours total. It's not that bad.
Hopefully this doesn't mess up your video. We'll see. All right, cool. You're close enough. It's the motion operators for Houdini. You can find it at houdini.school. Sign up. You can sign up for a free account but yeah, there's 160 lessons, 8.5 hours of video content. It's really, really fantastic. I've gone through about half of it now, just in my free time of what I can do. But yeah, it's pretty great. Any thoughts on additional tools you want to bring, you want to do with MOPS? Someone was at work. I was like, what do you want to ask him? And he said, ask him if he's planning on bringing any fall offs or anything like that to cops, which
cops.
Yeah. 'Cause cops, Houdini has been improving cops a lot lately. I've seen a lot of really cool cops workflows, I'm curious if there's anything there that, you see that might be a cool MOPS type, workflow or something.
I've got to think about it, just because, a lot of the stuff that MOPS is doing for fall-offs, it's just ramps in 3D space. It's like, it's much simpler to think about those things in 2D space. You've got a ramp tool, you've got a circle tool, you have a distance cop and all of that stuff. So some of that is a solved problem. There's definitely ways that you can get existing MOPS stuff to interact with cops. For example, if you're stamping points, you can use regular attributes to do that. The same template attributes that you would use to stamp things in 3D are used in 2D. So you could use MOPS to drive rotations to randomize things. You just open up the cop network, set some or open up your SOPs, set the attributes on those points, and then when you rasterize them in cops or you bring them in for stamp points, the same attributes under the hood are being used. So scale, p-scale, the orient attribute, you can turn that on if you don't want to use the sprite rotation. It's all the same stuff. I gotta kind of sit down and think about what a MOPS tool in Copernicus would do differently, or where the sort of holes are in implementation.
Yeah.
I've spent a little bit of time in COPS, but I haven't really pushed it that much. I've seen some really cool stuff done in terms of COPS solvers and other really interesting things that came out sort of after they introduced the Pyro solver and solvers became more viable. But yeah, that's an interesting question, and I wonder which fall-offs would make sense to implement in 2D, or if there are entirely new ones I haven't even thought of. In terms of tools that I'm working on, so one of the last things I released was a camera.
Okay.
And it's a camera rig, so it's driven by kin effects under the hood, but what you see is at object level, and it's it's a dolly with a boom and a column, and the camera has like a nodal offset, so like it rotates around a more realistic pivot rather than like directly around the film back.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it does make a difference when you're like panning, like how the motion is perceived. And it has some other it's just meant to be more convenient and more fun to work with. So like you can just it has those Python state viewport handles that I was telling you about. It uses those to sort of draw an imaginary crane rig on the screen that you can just grab the individual parts with and like resize, rotate.
That's cool.
Smoosh stuff around. So that was a tough one to put together because it's translating, because cameras are at object level.
I was going to say, that sounds like a lot of
Everything else is
trigonometry.
in SOPs. So, it wasn't that bad from a math perspective. There's definitely some VEX involved in like setting transforms and like setting like aim constraints and things like that. But that's like typical stuff at this point that you would do in VEX. It was more about just like getting camera attributes and kin effects to talk to each other, and then do it in a way that's consistent and works with those viewport handles. It's always the core setup didn't take me more than a day to put together, but it's like all the details is where it really gets punishing, because you want people to just be able to pick it up and move it with no friction at all. Like they just know what to do. And that part takes a long time, because like every conceivable edge case, every misclick that a user could have, like you want to be able to catch that somehow so that they're not getting an error, thinking they're doing something wrong. And you also want to make sure that it's fun, so that like when they're interacting with this thing and they grab it, like I talked about this before in a talk I did at Hive Horizon a couple of years ago, but my sort of guideline for like if a tool is good enough, it's one thing that the tool does what it's supposed to do. I mean, obviously that's important, but especially for things that are in motion, you want the tool to be something that an animator is going to make sound effects while they use it. If an animator grabs something and they're just like, like while they're moving it around, like that, you nailed it. Like that's what you want. It's like they're having fun, and it feels like something that they want to interact with, and that makes a huge difference. It means that they intuitively get what the thing is supposed to do. And it means that it's interactive enough that they're not sitting there waiting for it to catch up. They're not waiting for cook time or anything. They're not confused. It just works. Yeah. And that's a big deal.
Yeah. Also, ease of use as well. You want to make sure that the tool is easy enough to where someone will be able to get into it and enjoy it, but not overly complicated where it just becomes a bunch of, sliders that the user isn't even gonna bother because
and that's one of the sort of naturally tough things about tool development, what we were talking about earlier with like atomic level tools, like the way that SideFX' core team likes to do, versus things that kind of wrap everything for you, is you can't predict everything a user is going to do. And that's why the core devs side effects more often than not want to have things be individual nodes that you set down, because they can't predict exactly what you're going to do. And if they wrap everything up into a single interface, into some sort of mega tool, it's going to have so many parameters in it that it becomes really difficult. It becomes frustrating to use. Yeah. Aside from the fact that it's like, there's no way you're going to catch every single edge case. So for a lot of these tools, I try not to sort of overstep my bounds there. Like if there's a way that you can take what's there, I have an option in this same rig for the same reason. Like, here's the rig. It does probably everything that I think that you're going to want to do with the camera rig. But if that's not enough, you can hit a button. It will take the KineFX skeleton that builds the rig and export it to a separate SOP network. And then you can just do whatever you want to those KineFX joints using SOPs the way that you normally would. And then it automatically outputs that back to the original camera rig, so that the camera will follow whatever it is that you did to the KineFX skeleton. So if you use like the secondary motion SOP, or if you use any other there are a bunch of MOPS KineFX tools that you can use for like extra springy motion or noise or whatever you want, and then just send it back and it'll read it.
That's cool.
And I've almost ported it to Solaris. It's been a real slog, but that was sort of the next step, and that's what I'm finishing up now, is trying to get it so that camera will operate not fully natively in Solaris. It's in Solaris, the interface is all in it, but it's still technically using SOPs under the hood.
Yeah.
Which is a little weird, but
How
USD is
is
pretty limited.
development for Solaris? Because we a couple years ago we were working on a project, and the whole team was like, oh yeah, this was back when I was freelancing at ABC a couple years ago. We're like, yeah, let's do this whole thing in Solaris, and it was a really tight deadline too. So it kind of just became this nightmare project because we were all new to it, and there were issues and stuff like that. And then even recently, the whole reason I came up with the Orbix exporter for Octane in Houdini, Andre Lebrov had done something similar, but it was entirely in Solaris, and I couldn't use it in object level or whatever. So it's like, I can see that there's a massive difference between working in Solaris and working SOP level.
Yeah, I'm not a total USD hater. And in terms of graphical interfaces for dealing with USD, like SideFX is doing a lot to try and make this approachable. The problem, I think, in my opinion, is more on USD's end. It's enormous.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, and it's very potentially brittle. And by brittle, I mean a single, it's typical of some other operations you might do in Houdini. A single checkbox is not checked, and all of a sudden your entire shop pipeline falls to pieces, and you don't really know why.
Yeah.
And that it's much worse, I think, in USD than it is in other parts of Houdini. And like, to be fair, USD is not Houdini. Like you're looking at it from within Houdini, and so you think that the rules are going to be the same, but they're not. They're two completely separate systems, and Houdini is trying as hard as it can to translate everything under the hood into native USD, even though it's not.
Yeah.
Developing for it has been illuminating, I guess. Like, I've learned a lot about USD a little more easily. I know that technically you can try to export to Karma directly from the Rob context, but like in practice, it doesn't really work that well. It definitely adds to the burden of being a new Houdini user quite a lot. Because now you're having to learn Houdini, and you have to learn rudimentary USD just to get your donut rendered on the screen or whatever, and that's tough.
Yeah,
it is hard. Like, that would have frustrated me if I hadn't already known Houdini and was trying to jump into USD.
Yeah,
the more I use it, the more it already made sense from a conceptual level. Like, you've got a big pipeline, you've got all these different things. You want proxies, you want you want layering, all of this stuff for, like, because I've spent a lot of time in my career writing pipeline tools for various companies.
Yeah.
So I understand how necessary it is to have good data flow and to have proxies and like have all this be predictable. It's just very hard to do for most TDs. I've seen great examples of brilliant TDs. There's a guy, I think his name is Matt Tillman. He goes by Pixel Ninja.
Okay.
Who's done a lot of really great tutorials for how USD works in like a small pipeline, like or even a solo user pipeline. Matt Ebb has also done some great presentations on USD from like a small team's perspective. But it does, no matter what, you need at least one person, if not yourself, who's going to be sort of the technician on it, who's going to be able to like sort of set up some of the scaffolding that you need in order to make it not burdensome to set up scenes. Because, like, again, especially in the motion graphics world, you don't want to sit there and have to think about what path your object is going to.
Like,
it's just you don't think about these things.
Yeah.
You just like, I got a cube and I'm going to clone it.
And
and so the more time that you spend having to puzzle through that, the less time you're spending iterating on design, and that's frustrating.
It is, yeah.
And so I totally understand the approach of like, well, we're just going to give you this GUI to sort of do it for you a little bit, or like at least like let you decide where these things go. But I think the problem right now is that it just it's missing that streamlined middleware layer where it can safely make assumptions about how you might want to set up a scene, but if you know what you're doing, you can step in and rearrange it.
Yeah.
They're trying, like, there's certain things that they've done, like the component builder, that are a good start. but I think it's going to take a while before they can figure out exactly how to set this up in a way that's going to be frictionless.
Yeah.
It's like USD is it's really complicated.
Yeah.
They're trying. I don't fault them at all for this being hard.
Yeah. I feel like USD is very similar as like ACES, you know? It's like ACES, and I say this all the time, it's like ACES, I feel like it's complicated just for being complicated, you know? And it's like I 100% understand the theory behind it and why you would want to work in an ACES workflow, you know? But it's just so much easier to just render, you know, sRGB, you know.
Yeah.
Same with USD. It's like, you know, if I can just, you know, send it to my ROP, I'm good to go and not have to work in a Solaris workflow. It's like, all right, I'm good.
The ACES thing is funny because like a lot of the explanations that I had read, so I wrote a blog post a while ago that got some traction called An Idiot's Guide to ACES, and it's outdated at this point. But it was, everything that I had read about it was so technical for not really any good reason. Like it had good reasons if you were a color scientist or a colorist, or like, you know, if you've ever been in a room full of colorists arguing with each other, like they never stop. And that's probably part of the reason why ACES is the way it's described is as convoluted as it is. But in practice, it shouldn't be that hard. You know, you have a rendering space and you have input color spaces for all of your textures or swatches or whatever. And all ACES is trying to do is just say, like, whatever these inputs are, whatever language that you're speaking up front, I'm going to translate everything to, you know, Estonian or Sanskrit or whatever. I'm going to translate everything to this universal language. And then when you are viewing it on a display or you're outputting it to something else, you're translating from that language to whatever language your monitor speaks.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. And like, once you understand that and you know what drop downs you need for different types of inputs, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It really isn't. It's just the way that it's been implemented and the way that people decided to name input color transforms.
Yeah.
And like named things after, you know, I know that there's like some technical debt here, but like sRGB is both a gamma space and a gamut with like color primaries in it.
Right.
Like, so now you have to deal with like sRGB linear or whatever versus sRGB gamma 22. It didn't have to be this hard.
Yeah, I agree.
But conceptually, it really isn't that bad. Like once you get it, you get it.
Again,
it go away.
I understand the logic behind it and the theory and stuff. It's so much easier just to render to sRGB. Skip all the.
And like honestly, as long as you're rendering, you know, linear, if you're gonna do compositing, like sRGB is. I do most of my work in ACES nowadays, but like it's not necessary. It really for most shows you don't really need it unless you're doing some really wild stuff with color. I know like a lot of the early ACES demos, they used the Lego Movie as sort of the example for it, and like the Lego Movie is a lot of very saturated colors and really like bright lighting and everything, and like I totally get it, but it's not. I think people sometimes overstate how much better a render can look in ACES versus sRGB. Like, man, we rendered Jurassic Park in sRGB. You know, like it still looks pretty good. Like, if a good artist is going to be able to pull a good image out of MS Paint if they want to.
That's funny. All right, I got one last question for you before we leave. I would love to know, as a very active Houdini user, if there's anything you would like to see added to Houdini. Like, what features do you feel like are missing?
That's tough.
Yeah. Because I ask this because I feel like Houdini is the Swiss Army knife that every other 3D program is trying to become, you know, with the exception of modeling. Modeling in Houdini is not fun. You know, modeling in anything else is fun, you know, but it's like, you want to do smoke, you want to do fire, you want to do particles, you want to do, you know, liquids or whatever. It's all in Houdini, you know, versus some of these other ones. It's like, we've got them. They're half baked, you know, but yeah.
I think the most important thing that they're working on right now is Apex.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in terms of things that I want to see done, it's going to be expanding that system into something that's a little less insane
Yeah.
to work with. It's that same middleware layer. Like for people who haven't looked into Apex, it's the way that Houdini works right now is with rigging or animation. And like one of the reasons why Maya is still the main tool for animators is like when you evaluate rigs or if you evaluate anything in the SOP context in Houdini, generally speaking, everything, like all of your data, all of your points, which means all of your bones at once, all of, get evaluated at the same time and goes down to the next chain. That's part of what makes Houdini really intuitive once you understand it, is that you run a rotate operation and you just have one wire coming out and then one wire going into the next node. And it's just like, I made these rotations, now I'm doing the next thing, now I'm doing the next thing. And it's very sensible. It works. The problem is that when you have a big scene with like 100 characters in it, and they all have 150 joints in them and a bunch of controlled joints and accessories and things like that, that evaluating one thing at a time or evaluating everything at once becomes really computationally expensive. And so you lose interactivity in the viewport, which is the worst thing in the world. For an animator, it's like a death sentence. So Apex is basically trying to make it easier to fan out all of these potential things that you could do in a rig into a flat hierarchy of sorts. And like, if you've ever looked at a rig or like a node graph in Maya and like wondered what level of hell you're on, it's sort of the same thing. It's like Maya already does all that fanning out. If you ever looked, it's like you have all these nodes with like a million different inputs and outputs, and it's extremely convoluted, impossible to read one of those networks unless you've been doing it for a really long time, but it's fast. And so Apex is sort of doing that, but at a deeper level and in weirder ways that I'm still new to it. So like I can't fully explain what it's doing, but my hope is that their middleware layer, in the same way that I'm hoping that they're going to do the same thing with USD, is as Apex matures, they're going to build more tools that make it easier for people to create their own rigging components or create their own tools, their own UIs, things like that, without having to go too deep into the technical world, without having to get too weird with Apex scripting or anything like that. Because again, you're going back to Python in order to build these things. You generally speaking, like, and rigging has always been very programming forward, but finding ways to smooth that process out and make it more accessible. I think that's what I'm, having been a very new user of Apex, that's sort of what I'm most interested in right now.
It's funny because like today was the first day that I have ever heard of Apex. And so I was asking the guys, I was like, hey, what's Apex? Because I saw that the fly animation, it's like someone had taken a Gaussian splat and animated it with Apex, which was really cool.
Yeah. But as soon as you ask what is Apex, I assume like everyone either turns white as a sheet, or they kind of just like look meekly away. Yeah, it's a little weird.
It's Apex. That's
it's very smart, and but it's extremely hard to use right now. It's too new.
Yeah.
But if it takes off and becomes what it's supposed to be, that's how you get animators, because like you're creating a system. If you have enough technical artists that can do this, you're creating an ecosystem in which you build rigs that are more fun to use, more responsive, and more scalable. And as soon as you do that, and you can convince animators that they want to be in that ecosystem, that's it. They'll use your software.
Yeah.
You've got them hooked.
100%. Henry, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. It was a really fun show.
Yeah, of course. This was fun.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks everyone for joining as well. Make sure to follow us on all the socials, especially YouTube, Twitch, Instagram. We've been doing our Thursday weekly MoGraph meetups or hangouts on YouTube this week. If you watched last week, you saw I was building a overlay for OBS so that me, Winbush, and EJ could all play video games together, and I think we're gonna do that this Thursday. So come hang out while we play Super Nintendo. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. That's around 7:00 Central Time, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. We've also got some great guests coming up in the next few weeks. We've got Mark Cernosa, and then Dave is coming back on the show to talk more Camp MoGraph stuff. It's gonna be really cool. Also, if you haven't done it already, make sure to sign up for your very own MoGraph.com account. It's a one-stop shop for everything a motion designer needs. Showcase your demo reel, projects you've worked on, post jobs, apply for jobs, sell your digital goods. for a fraction of the cost that it does of other, digital selling goods places. And you can find meetup groups or start one of your own. So much more is planned. Henry, thank you so much for being on the show. It was fantastic. Really excited. For those who are curious, where can they find you online?
I am on Discord as Toadstorm, or just email me, henry@toadstorm.com. Happy to answer questions.
And if someone wants to pick up MOPS Plus, where do they go?
For anything MOPS, and I would recommend starting with the open source version, go to motionoperators.com.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much, man. I guess until next week, I am Matt, and you are Henry, and we are out. Later, yo!
It's pretty good, I guess.